Today, we are going to be taking a look at part of the cognition unit in 7, specifically looking at Module 31 on memory. We're going to be studying and encoding memories. How do we take information that we see, hear, and so on, and store it into our memory? So, what would life be like if we had no memory? If you remember, we talked about top down, bottom up processing. Memory makes our life easier. So, how would you answer questions without memory? Like, how are you today? It would be very difficult. So, memory is defined as learning over time through what is called encoding, storage, and retrieval of information. When we think of memory, one of the disorders we think of is Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is characterized by the stripping away of our memory. They did a study of nuns who developed Alzheimer's disease, and they went back to their writings and found that years and years of writing, the nuns who had Alzheimer's disease had low idea density in their writing. And that is a indicator that down the road, somebody may end up with Alzheimer's disease. It is a progressive neurodegeneration, and it is fatal. So, what happens when we talk about this memory degeneration? Difficulty remembering new information. It is family members and close friends become strangers. You have complex speech that devolves to simple sentences. So it is reverting back to childlike conditions. So let's take a look at how we measure our memory. There are 3 ways in which we measure memory: recall, recognition, and relearning. Recall is the retrieval of information that is not currently in our conscious, but can be recalled using cues. Recognition is the identification of things that we've previously learned. And relearning is learning something quickly when it is a second or a later time. Recall uses questions like fill in the blank or short answer or essay prompts. Recognition is a multiple choice or matching test question. And relearning is studying for a final exam over the entire year's course of content. So, what subjects are more likely to involve, for example, recall tests that you take at school? Or which ones use recognition? In most cases, relearning is used in all subjects. Recall is telling your friend about a time when you won goldfish at the carnival. Recognition is seeing a brand of cereal on the grocery shelf and recognizing it from commercials. Relearning is traveling to Costa Rica and pulling back the Spanish you learned in 10th grade. So, how do we as psychologists describe the human memory system? It's through information processing. It is encoding, that means we put in new information. We store what we call organizing information, or retrieve, that we pull it out from our memory. One of the concepts that we talked about before is this idea of parallel processing. This is where we can basically look at many aspects of a problem simultaneously. The brain's natural mode for information processing has many functions. One of the things that we did when we did sensations and perceptions is being able to see motion, form, depth, and color. So let's take a look at some different parts of our memory. The first one we're going to talk about is working memory. What is working memory? Working memory is short-term memory that adds conscious, active processing and incoming auditory and visual information, and of information retrieved from long-term memory. It is working memory because it is what we are working on at the moment. Let's take a look at explicit and implicit memory. Implicit memory is something we're not aware that we learned. It is basically general information. Things like the presidents of the United States or the alphabet. Nobody really can remember the day that you learned that information, but you learned it. All right. So it deals with our long term memory independent of our conscious recollection. Explicit memory is the when and where I learned it. It is the first time you learned to ride your bicycle, or you're working at a job and you can remember them telling you what to do or showing you what to do. All right. So this is also long term memory, but we know and we can declare it. It's also called declarative memory. So in explicit memory, we encode explicit memories through what is called effortful processing. We encode that requires our attention and conscious effort. So new information that you have in the classroom that is meaningful to you, you're going to put effort to processing that information. That's explicit memory. Implicit memory is automatic processing, unconsciously encoding incidental information. There's what we call iconic memory. This is fleeting sensory memory of visual stimuli. For a short second, for a few seconds, we can register the exact representation of a scene and recall in great detail. So this is also referred to as momentary memory. Some would refer to this as photographic memory. Think of an icon. It's an image. Echoic memory is auditory stimuli memory. All right. Picture yourself in a class and your attention drifts to thoughts over the weekend. If your mildly irked teacher tests you by saying, "What did I just say?" you can recover in the last words from your mind's echo chamber. You're able to remember just a little bit that last part of what the teacher says. It's called the recency effect. How is short term and working memory related? Short term memory refers to what we can briefly retain. Working memory is also that process, but we're recalling it from long term memory. So in our working memory, we're limited about 7 items. It fades from 10 to 30 seconds if nothing's done. So have you ever heard the phrase in one ear and out the other? That is our working memory. Memories stay with us for longer, but not permanently are stored into what is called working memory. What is our capacity? I just said this. You heard of the seven wonders of the world. Okay. Um, Researchers confirm that we can um, take in anywhere from 5 to 9 pieces of information. So we typically say 7 ± 2. Once we get more than that, then we have a hard time recalling. We're going to do some activities with this tomorrow that will work our short-term memory capacity. This is a graph that shows you about how short-term memory disappears without doing work to it, without rehearsing something, which we talked about with the numbers yesterday. People will drastically lose that information. What is our working memory capacity? What happens with working memory is we associate with old memories to solve problems. So as we take a look, because more experiences allow better working, children are not as good at working memory as adults are. So let's take a look at some of the things that we talked about yesterday in effortful processing strategies that can help us encode and retrieve. Things like chunking, large units with the numbers, mnemonic devices, we're going to be talking about hierarchies. These are all parts of effortful processing. So we use these to remember mass information. For example, what are the Great Lakes? A new mnemonic device for that would be homes, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior. It is a way for remembering large bits of information through a mnemonic device. Roy G. Biv is another example. My very energetic mother just served up 9 pancakes. These are all acronyms that help you through mnemonic devices. Here is a little sample of what we did yesterday with the dates, the FBI, CIA, DA. This is a way of chunking large amounts of information to remember. Mnemonic devices we talked about are memory aids, techniques that we use, vivid imagery, organizational devices like acronyms. Peg word systems is a mnemonic device that utilizes visual imagery. First, we memorize the peg word pairs on the right. Next, we visually associate the peg words with to be remembered items. Close your eyes and see the image you create. Really focus on it. Now follow the instructions below. This is another thing we did yesterday with the words on your list. How does hierarchies aid our ability to retrieve? When we organize words and concepts into hierarchical groups, they help us remember a lot better. The spacing effect impacts our memory retrieval. The tendency to study throughout time, distribute how much time we spend rather than cramming, yields better long-term retention than that of cramming. So you have spacing effect versus mass practice. Distributed practice produces better long-term recall. And as you get into college, I would suggest that you do spacing effect as a tool. It will help you do better on your testing. One effective way to distribute is repeating self-testing. This is one of the tools that I learned from a high school teacher, is that I would make my own tests as a way of studying for a test. And I found that it did a lot better for me to remember information as I tested myself. Two techniques that students frequently report using for studying is highlighting and underlining. This is a retrieval practice, is powerful for learning. There's shallow processing and then there's deep processing. Shallow means that encoding on a basic level based on the structure in which it appears of words. Deep processing has to do with semantics. It is the meanings of words. When we deep process, we'll remember more because it has meaning. Make material meaningful. Ebbinghaus established that compared to learning nonsense syllables, learning meaningful material required 1/10 the effort. Do you want to work harder at remembering the information, or do you want it to take less effort? I think we all like less effort. So how do we make less effort? According to the Ebbinghaus curve that is in this PowerPoint, we learn better when we make meaning of it. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.